bunch of you guys have told me to check out this My Little Pony AU called My Golden Pony Friendship is Shiny, created by Going Gold on TikTok and YouTube. I avoided this one at first because it didn't look scary at first glance, but once I actually read it, I realized that it is way darker than I thought, and it's different from many of the other infection AUs that we've covered thus far. This AU actually starts off with a future version of AJ speaking to us, trying to recall how this infection first started. And we learned that it has something to do with this new makeup brand called Golden Gleam by Mycota. And while AJ has never been big on makeup, most of the other ponies are to varying degrees, with Rarity being number one. And based on this panel here, it seems like whatever is about to happen changed their friendship forever. And with that knowledge, we cut back to 10 months previous to see how this whole ordeal began. And the first thing that we see is this original character named Mycota, which for nerds like me, you know means like Kingdom Fungus, which will play a huge role in this AU. Apparently, Mycota is a pop idol in Canterlot and has come out with this makeup brand called Golden Gleam, which takes the form of a powder that people can actually put on their face, or in this case, ponies can put all over their body. I imagine that it's very similar to the makeup that women use nowadays to kind of like fix their complexion or make it a certain tone. At the end of this chapter, we learn that Apple Bloom was watching this commercial on TV and AJ comes into the room to put a stop to it, not wanting her sister to get caught up in this fad. But judging by the look in Mycota's eye here, I think that you can tell that something is definitely off with her. Chapter 3 starts with Mycota releasing 3 new Golden Gleam powders, and it looks like Lyra has already invested into some of it. And I noticed that even when Bonbon is trying to tell her that Mycota has been acting kind of weird lately, Lyra just keeps speaking as if she didn't even hear her. To my surprise, Bonbon doesn't seem to be interested in this new product at all, saying that she's lost all respect for Mycota after the interview the other night. And as she's about to walk away, clearly done with this conversation, Lyra lets out a sneeze, and I noticed that little golden specks, or likely spores, are floating in the air. And while Bonbon doesn't seem to be too concerned about it, just thinking that Lyra is allergic to the product, I think this may be one of the ways that this infection could possibly spread. But before anything else can happen with Lyra, she sees another pony shining just like her, fully taking her attention away from Bonbon, and also letting us know that a lot of ponies are likely using this product now. In chapter 4, we learn that the other ponies have started catching on to how weird Mycota has been acting, and they also highlight that her name used to be Micah. And the name change was relatively recent to go with this new makeup line. We also learned that Mycota sent a package full of her makeup to the royal castle, hoping that the princesses would actually use this product, but was promptly rejected. Which at the very least may mean that Luna and Celestia will be free of the infection, or at least free for a little while. After that, we see another pony come onto this forum, and they're actually defending Mycota, saying that everything they've heard is fake news.
Fake, disgusting news.
And also showcasing that as a pop star, Mycota definitely has some diehard fans, which may end up being an issue in the future. Next, we see Rarity78 pop into the chat room, and she's telling the group how much she loves the new product, giving even more evidence of this diehard fan base. Now, when we move over to chapter 5, we see Twilight is in her home calling for Spike, asking if he's ready to go to Angel's party. But Spike is in a bit of distress because he realized that a bunch of stuff is missing from the home, almost as if somebody's broken in. But Twilight just dismisses this idea, saying that they probably just misplaced some stuff. And while this could be true, based on Spike's face here, I don't think that actually is going to be the case. Now, a bit later in the day, we see a bunch of the ponies have arrived at the party location, but they're waiting for Fluttershy, Angel, and Rarity to show up. And the first thing that AJ notices when Shy arrives is that she has a golden gleam about her, which is a telltale sign that she has used the new beauty product. But when AJ actually goes to ask her about it, we see that Shy gets embarrassed and runs out of the party, saying that she would never use the stuff, which is clearly a lie. And while Pinky tells AJ to go easy on her, I don't think that she was actually trying to be mean here. The last thing that we see in this chapter is AJ looking out the window at something glowing brightly. And we learn very quickly that this glowing figure is actually Rarity, showing up fashionably late, showing off her new clothes and also her new glimmer. And seeing this causes AJ to ask for a private meeting, where she asks Rarity if she's going gold, which I think is the term that the ponies are using when they apply too much of this makeup product. And while Rarity assures her that she has it under control, I think that she is one of the ponies most likely to go overboard, especially since she can be a little vain. A few days later, we see AJ out in the town market buying some carrots. We see Cherryberry is the shop clerk and is telling AJ how good her coat would look if she used a little bit of the golden gleam, even going as far as to try to give her a free sample. And for me, this is a huge red flag because I think this is going to be the way that this infection probably spreads. Once you put on this makeup, the infection is probably going to be in your system. Luckily, AJ gets the creeps from the clerk and she just takes her carrots and heads home. Now, once she's at the dinner table with her family, Apple Bloom starts talking about how Sweetie Belle is going to let her use some of her makeup tomorrow. And of course, AJ freaks out a little bit, saying that something is off with the creator of the product and that Bloom should stay away from it. But since she is a young girl, Apple Bloom wants to participate in a new trend, so even though her sister begs her not to, you can tell that she is still thinking about it here. And just to prove AJ's point, in the next chapter, we see that Bonbon has finally convinced Lyra to use the makeup, and in some of these panels, she looks absolutely insane, as if the makeup is doing more than simply changing the color of her coat. And we also get confirmation that the more you use this makeup, the more golden your coat becomes, which seems to be Lyra's plan here. Now, back over with AJ, we see that she goes to Twilight's home to see if she can find more information about this new beauty product after doing some of her own research and learning that the main ingredient of this makeup is called Aurum mycota, which is actually a real thing. It basically means a fungus that has a symbiotic relationship with a plant, but AJ doesn't really understand what that means, which is why she has come to Twilight Library to get more information. And luckily, Spike is able to locate the book in a matter of seconds. Funny thing to note here is that he found this book under one of the bookcases a few days ago, almost as if somebody was trying to hide it, but I think we'll come back to this point a little bit later. Now that AJ has this book, she's ready to go back to her farm to do some studying, but she does ask Twilight to join her because she thinks that she'll be a great help in this research. But Twilight has to refuse because she's waiting for a package. Turns out that Rarity has not only offered to give Twilight a sample of the new makeup, but she is sending it to every pony in Ponyville, which makes me think that my theory is correct, that whatever this infection is definitely going to be spreading once you put on that makeup. AJ is clearly uncomfortable with this idea, but there isn't really anything else that she can do except go research. Next, we have chapter 10, and this one was very interesting. We get to see another chat room with the topic being Mycota went missing. And a lot of the fans believe that Mycota's PR team is using old interviews of her so that her fan base doesn't panic. We also see that the paparazzi was able to get some pictures of her before she disappeared, and it looks like she is literally melting. But if that wasn't bad enough, we also get this video giving us an even better look at the makeup running down her face while she is crying and looking at the camera. At one point, it looks like she is speaking directly to the audience as she screams for help before the video cuts out. And this kind of makes me think that maybe even Mycota didn't know the effect that this makeup would have once she put it out into the world. But we'll have to look a little deeper in the story to see if that theory is true. The next scene cuts back over to Rarity, and of course she has gone overboard with using this powder, continuing to put more and more on her body. And now we can see that she is even starting to bleed, but I can't tell if this is just in her mouth or if it's coming from deeper in her body. And honestly, I hate that I was right about Rarity getting caught up in this makeup fad, but I kind of knew it was going to happen. And to make matters worse, we see that she did actually end up sending some of her makeup to Twilight, but surprisingly, Spike speaks up and says that he has a bad feeling about this product. He even states that he recently saw Rarity and she doesn't look like herself, even going as far as to say that he doesn't even think that that pony he saw was the real Rarity. And while Twilight doesn't believe this right away, she is at least willing to stop and listen to Spike, which I hope means that we'll actually get an AU where Twilight stays healthy the whole time. In this next scene, we finally get some real information about the Aurum mycota. The first piece of information being that it is indeed a fungus, but it's also so beautiful that it looks more like a golden flower. And since this fungus is invasive, it is all over Equestria. And just as we suspected, when the fungus is turned into a powder, it can be toxic in high doses, binding onto the skin and then slowly piercing through until it gets into the bloodstream. At that point, it will make its way to the brain, and once there, it can take control of the host, very similar to cordyceps in The Last of Us, or the hungry virus in the novel The Girl with All the Gifts, if you guys have read that one, or I guess seen the movie. Next, we get to see the stages of the infection, and at stage 1, the pony is pretty much unchanged. The only symptoms that they have are a runny nose and maybe a slight cough. But if they keep using the makeup, they'll move over to stage 2, and this is where obvious signs of fatigue and irritation will occur. And in order to hide this, the pony will then use more makeup, which of course will only increase the rate of their infection, while also causing thinning of the hair and veins to start popping up all over their bodies. Stage 3 is where the fungus will start to take over the body of the pony, but more importantly, it tries to mimic what the host would normally do. And this is really bad news because that means that if the ponies are not aware of the fungus or simply not really paying attention, an infected pony can blend in for a long period of time, which means a greater chance of other ponies getting infected. The only reason Spike was able to clock Rarity is because he has known her for so long and can tell that she was kind of off. The one piece of good news here is that at this stage, the ponies can still wrestle control back from the fungus, which is what I think we saw with Mycota earlier. The bad news is that there's no cure as of now. Unfortunately, the last few pages were ripped out of this book, but at this point, AJ, who was the pony reading the notes, has seen enough to know that she needs to warn all her friends and especially her little sister. The first pony that AJ tries to find was Pinkie Pie, but she was not in her shop at the time. And I also want to point out that both of these ponies here are wearing the makeup, but they still seem to be in the early stages of the infection. Next, AJ moves over to Shy's cottage. And I'm really worried about her because we know that she was one of the first ponies in town to start using the makeup. But just like with Pinkie, she's nowhere to be found either. After that, AJ goes to find Dashie, and the same thing happens there. Her home is also completely empty. The last spot that she goes is to Rarity's house, and this is where she finds all 3 ponies together, and they are all shining. And you can tell by AJ's face here that she knows something might be wrong, and she definitely should have followed her instincts, because once she actually enters this room, Rarity closes the door behind her, telling AJ that it's time for her to join the fun. And as we can see, Rarity is deep in the infection, so much so that she is bleeding through the makeup. Next, we see Rarity tell AJ that she and the other ponies have been trying different shades of Golden Gleam, and now it's time for her to get some for herself. And honestly, I was surprised to see that the other ponies in this room have been trying to leave this whole time, but Rarity has been holding them hostage, even tying Rainbow's wings. I assumed that they were all under the control of the fungus already, and I'm happy to see that I was wrong about that. Now, luckily, when Rarity is trying to push the bronze golden onto AJ, she tells her that she would rather have the iridescent one, causing Rarity to go upstairs and grab some. This gives AJ time to grab these papers off the table, which I assume are going to give us more stages of the infection, and then she and the other ponies are able to run out of the house before Rarity returns. But they are still not safe at this point, because as we see here, a bunch of ponies in the street are infected with the fungus, and they are all trying to get AJ to use the product. And they are getting more and more angry at the fact that she keeps refusing. As we move over to the next chapter, we're allowed to see what was on the pages that AJ picked up, and as I suspected, it is more information on the fungus. We get to see that at stage 4 of the infection, the fungus is in full control of the brain, and ponies at this stage are usually completely golden. At this point, the pony no longer needs to put on the makeup and focuses mostly on trying to act as much like the host as it can. The pony will also start having internal bleeding, lose their ability to fly, and possibly lose their ability to use magic. Stage 5 is the final stage of the infection, and once they get to this level, their system pretty much completely shuts down, and the fungus will leave the host in order to find a fresh body. Sadly, once the fungus exits the body, the pony will pass away, and the body will start to rot, turning into golden goop. And out of that puddle of golden goop, more of the fungus will grow, giving the infected ponies more opportunities to make more of the makeup. Now, if all that wasn't bad enough, we also learned that the fungus is airborne, which means that if an infected pony is in the same room as a clean pony, there is a possibility that they can start the process of the infection. We also learned that while there is no cure for the infection, if ponies stop using the makeup early on and quarantine for at least 48 hours, they can stop the spread before it can get into the bloodstream. But once the ponies are at stage 3, it is too late for them to actually be saved. With this new information, it becomes clear to the ponies that Rarity is likely the one that ripped the pages out of the book, and also the one that broke into Twilight's home to try to hide information about the fungus, justifying what Spike has been thinking all along, but more importantly, confirming that Rarity has been fully taken over by the fungus. In the next chapter, we see the ponies panicking a little bit because most of them have used the makeup already and are not sure if they are too far gone yet or not. But what's worse is the fact that there is a knock on the door. And we see a bunch of infected ponies are outside Twilight's home, demanding AJ use some of the golden gleam, since she's the only pony in town that hasn't used it thus far, outside of Twilight, I think. And this scene would almost be funny if we didn't know how serious this situation actually is. As more and more infected gather around outside, AJ tells the group that they need to make it to her farm. And Twilight, having no other choice, tries to teleport the whole group away, even though this will really be stretching her abilities. As we move over to the next chapter, we see that all the ponies were able to make it to AJ's farm, but in order to be safe, Dash, Pinky, and Shy will have to be quarantined in the farm's basement. We also see that Apple Bloom is pretty devastated with everything going on, especially considering that one of her best friends is likely infected now. After that, we get to see some more stat sheets, and I'm happy to see that the entire Apple family is still clean of the infection and have also managed to fortify the farm, which should keep the infected out for at least a time. We also get to see each of the other ponies, and while Twilight is a bit tired from using so much of her magic, she is free of the infection and in good health overall. The same can be said for Spike, and honestly, I'm happy to see that he has survived this long. AJ, on the other hand, is in shock, but overall, she's still in good health. Her big issue is that she can't figure out how to comfort Apple Bloom. Next, we see that Pinkie Pie is at stage 1 of the infection alongside Rainbow Dash, but Fluttershy is actually at stage 2, which makes sense considering that she's been using the makeup for much longer. The good news is that all of them should be able to be saved if they stop using the product now. In the next chapter, we see Pinky, Dash, and Rainbow in the basement trying to come up with a plan for what to do next, and they decide that once they've quarantined, Dash is going to go over to Cloudsdale and see if any of the Pegasus are uninfected. But when they try to talk to Fluttershy about it, she simply says that she has to get back home to take care of her critters, especially since she let Angel use some of the golden gleam. And she doesn't really care that the town is full of infected ponies because her guilt is outweighing her fear, at least as of right now. And while Pinky tries to reassure her that it isn't her fault, Shy is convinced that it's her responsibility to make sure all the critters survive. Seeing that there isn't much that they can say to convince her, the ponies decide to go to bed. But as they're falling asleep, we see a small fungus growing in a corner of the room, which means that this farm is definitely not as safe as the ponies thought it was. The next morning, we see a video pop up featuring Makoto, and she is telling the public that she is not actually missing, but rather the videos floating around the internet are all fake, and she is not involved with them at all. She goes on to speak about how disgusted she is with people playing this prank and tells ponies to do more research in the future before believing everything they see on the internet. And while the video is kind of convincing, I like that AJ and Twilight are not falling for it, especially after everything that they've seen in the last few days. The only thing that confuses me is that Twilight says even though Makoto has been wearing this makeup for months, she still looks fine. But judging by her face here, I would have to disagree. She looks absolutely wicked. Later that day, we see that Dashie has come back from Cloudsdale, and unfortunately, every pony she saw was completely infected. Pinkie Pie, on the other hand, went out to the city center, and she saw that Mayor is also infected and covering her entire home in the makeup. And even though Twilight has been trying to reach out to Celestia, she still hasn't responded. Although, I don't think that Luna or Celestia are vain enough to actually use the makeup, so I'm holding out hope for them. Next, we see that Twilight suggests that they should go find Zecora, which I think is the best idea they've had thus far. Getting her on the team will increase their chances of finding a cure significantly. But needing some backup, Twilight goes ahead and recruits Apple Bloom and Pinky to go along with her, but there is still one glaring issue remaining. Fluttershy has been locked in one of the rooms all day and is refusing to come out. And when Pinky goes to the door, we learn that Shy believes that she is actually at the 3rd stage of the infection, saying that she can feel the fungus in her brain. And she is staying in a room because she doesn't want to endanger her friends. And while the other ponies try to ensure her that she should be clean of the infection since they quarantined for a few days, eventually they give up and allow her to stay in the room, thinking that she'll eventually just come out on her own. But since the team doesn't actually believe that she's at stage 3, they just go on with their day, with Twilight taking her group to head out and find Zecora. And in the next scene, we see that the ponies were able to find Zecora and she is still healthy. Surprisingly though, she has no idea what's going on with this fungus. And while this is a small detail, I love that Zecora is actually speaking in rhymes in this AU. Most don't actually take the time to do that. Unfortunately, even though Zecora is very knowledgeable about plants, she has never heard of this particular fungus. But she does have this bag full of plum tree seeds, which is a common antifungal. Zecora claims that if they plant these seeds, the plant that springs up will be able to freeze the fungus. And while the group tries to get Zecora to come back with them, she tells them all that she would rather stay in her home because she has all her potions and equipment here. And she's also managed to stay safe this whole time, so she feels like she can ride out this outbreak here. But just when she finished speaking, they hear some howling in the distance, and we learn that since it is a full moon tonight, a bunch of the timber wolves will be out in the woods. And not wanting the ponies to get hurt, Zecora insists that they stay at her place tonight. Now, while they are all hanging out with Zecora, we cut over to the other ponies and we see that AJ and Dashy are checking out the local hospital. And I was surprised to see that it is mostly empty. I say mostly because as Dash and AJ are arguing here, we see Redheart come from behind this bed, pleading for some water. And it is clear that she is in the later stages of the infection and can't be saved. And once the girls see her, Dash immediately goes on the offensive and kicks Redheart out of the window. And then she immediately starts to gloat to AJ because she thought that Dash would freeze up if they actually saw any infected ponies. Now when AJ looks out the window, she sees a whole group of infected ponies walking down the street, and it seems like they are being led by Rarity. Once they make it to the hospital, Rarity sees Redheart lying on the ground, and she uses her magic to lift her in the air. And while it's hard to tell exactly what she does here, I think that she turns Redheart into a puddle of fungus and basically absorbs her life force. Seeing this, AJ stops looking out the window right before Rarity looks up. And while it seems like they are still hidden, the ponies understand that it's time for them to get out of this hospital. While that is happening, we get to see Fluttershy again, and it looks like she was correct about being infected. Unlike the other ponies, her makeup isn't coming off, and if we zoom in, we can see that her eyes are turning red. I also find it interesting that she believes that she can feel the fungus moving inside her. It seems like Spike was left behind to look after her, and we see him coming to the door to check on her and ask who she's talking to. And of course, Shy lies, saying no one. Spike, not wanting to push her, leaves her food outside the door and lets her continue to be alone. The final panel of this chapter shows Shy's new stat sheet, and it doesn't show us the level of infection that she's at, but we do get to see that her stress level is almost at 100, and she believes that she won't be able to keep her mind for much longer. The next morning, we see Twilight's group leaving Zecora's home, and the last words that she has for them is to make sure they document everything they can about the infection. The more they can learn, the easier it will be to control this outbreak. After that, the group makes it back home safely, and we see that AJ made it back home as well, and the ponies immediately start to plant the seeds that Zecora gave them, wanting to get a leg up on this infection. And I love how they all pitch in their own way, especially Dashy, who gets a rain cloud so that they can have water for the crops, and also drenching AJ in the process. Later that day, Pinky asks Spike if Shy has come out of her room yet, and since he hasn't checked on her since yesterday, Pinky goes to take a look. But when she calls out to her, there's no response. And feeling like something is wrong, they go get Applejack to see if she can open the door. And not wanting to waste any time, AJ just kicks the door open, and all they see is an empty room and an open window. But then they remember that Fluttershy was talking about going back to Ponyville so that she can take care of all her critters, and they head over to her place to see if she's still there. And while the inside of her house is empty, they can hear noises coming from the backyard, and when they open the door, they see that all the critters are covered in the makeup. And based on the looks on their faces here, the ponies understand that Shy really is infected. But even more pressing is the fact that Shy tells her animals to attack them, and this bear looks like he can put up a pretty dang good fight. Luckily, the ponies are able to get back into Fluttershy's cottage before the bear can get to them. And while in this cottage, Twilight is trying to figure out why Shy is still infected. But ultimately, it doesn't matter, and they decided they need to capture her and bring her back with them if possible. Remembering that Zecora said they should try to learn as much about this fungus and the infected ponies as they can. So still in her resolve, we see Twilight step outside and yell out that there are 4 uninfected ponies here that could really use the Midas touch. And like a moth to the flame, Shy comes immediately, flying through the open door and right into the trap that the ponies set up for her. In between AJ's lasso work and Twilight's magic, they have her contained pretty good. Now as they're heading back home, they're trying to think of possible ways that they can keep her contained without hurting her. But what is more important is when they bring up Rarity. While they want to save her as well, AJ brings up the fact that Rarity seems to be a leader of the infected ponies. And she also confirms that Rarity has the ability to suck the life out of the other infected, which means that she is a very dangerous target and they'll probably have to hold off on trying to save her. The next chapter shows the ponies back home, and they are using the leaves from the plum tree to make a potential cure. I find it kind of funny that Pinky has turned into a full-blown chemist at this point, putting some of her baking skills to use. The result is this pink powder that Pinky has named plum sugar. It seems like they didn't immediately use the powder on Fluttershy, but instead continue scouting for more information. And this is when we see Rainbow find this infected pony crawling on the ground, pleading for help. And while Rainbow is wary at first, she changes her mind when the infected pony offers her a notebook that has a way to save the town. Not wanting to pass up this chance, Rainbow takes the little pack that has the book inside and heads back to the other ponies to tell them about this encounter. And while AJ doesn't trust this newcomer, Twilight wants to go meet her, and they decide to bring her back to the barn and place her in the quarantine, hoping that it isn't too late to save her. Now, while they're all looking after this new pony, we cut back over to the basement and that little fungus that was growing inside, and this is so much worse than I was expecting. The fungus has grown deep into the earth, and now it's traveled its way over to the orchard, turning all the apples golden. And while I don't think that any of the ponies will be dumb enough to eat them,
You sure about that?
it is still a huge source of food that has been taken away, which is one of the most important sources in any outbreak. The next chapter starts with this letter directed to Princess Cadance in shining armor, asking them to come to Canterlot for a super special wedding gift. And I'm happy to see that Cadance and shining armor are smart enough to understand that Luna and Celestia definitely didn't write this letter, but also realizing that something may have happened to them and that they need to get to Canterlot soon to check and see if they're okay. Back over at the barn, we see that Rainbow has been fitted with a bunch of protection gear because she's getting ready to go into Fluttershy's cell and use the plum sugar on her. And for a moment, it looks like it may have worked, but then Fluttershy reverts back to her crazy self, asking for Golden Gleam. And this is where the ponies remember that Zecora didn't say that the plum tree leaves would cure the fungus, but rather freeze it. So maybe the plum sugar just ensures that the fungus will not be able to spread any further, which is also very helpful, or as Pinky says, a partial success. The next chapter starts with Makoto back on the television doing another interview. And in this interview, we learn that she has plans to meet up with the princesses in 10 days. And while she says that it's going to be a collaboration, Twilight knows that she is up to no good. And based on her face here, it is clear that she is fully taken over by the fungus and is long past the point of saving. The chapter ends with Twilight realizing that they only have 10 days to find a cure, or Makoto is likely going to take over all of Equestria. And I say this because if she does manage to infect Luna and Celestia, she basically gains their power. Now back over at the barn, we see that Pinky is bringing Fluttershy some lunch, but for a moment, Shy seems like her regular old self again. She even says, "You gotta get rid of this thing living inside me. I can't take it." But when Pinky asks if that's really her, the fungus takes over again and tries to guilt Pinky into letting her out, asking, "Why would you lock up your best friend?" and then giving this creepy smile while saying, "Don't worry about what I said before. I'm cured, Pinky. I'm all better. You can let me out of this thing, okay? I'll only forgive you if you let me out." And I'm really happy to see that Pinky didn't fall for this facade, especially because it doesn't take long for Shy to break and start slamming her head into this glass. At the end of the chapter, Pinky says that she thought it was the real Shy for a second. And I don't think that she's wrong. I think that Shy is somewhere between like stage 3 and 4, but maybe she's still able to get some of her consciousness there, which is why she still has moments where she's in control. And I hope that this means that there's still time to actually save her. While that's going on, AJ and Apple Bloom are out in the orchard gathering apples so that they can make some apple pies. But while they were harvesting, Apple Bloom actually sees something gleaming out in the distance, and thinking that it might be the fungus, the ponies go over there to check it out, and what they end up seeing is that some of the apples are infected, and even worse, someone has already picked a few of them. Seeing this, AJ panics and starts running back to the barn. And while she's heading over there, we cut back to the house and we see that Granny has just finished making a apple pie and is trying to get Pinky to take a slice. But she notices that something seems off with this pie, and when she asks Granny about it, we see her go over to the table, which has a few golden apples on it. And Pinky understands immediately that the apples are infected, which means that Granny is also infected. And then we see Granny Smith trying to get Pinky to eat some of these apples, chasing her out of the house. Luckily, before things can get out of hand, Rainbow shows up and puts a bucket over Granny's head, and Twilight uses her magic to contain her. The thing that is most scary about this situation is that Granny ate the golden apple only about 12 hours ago, and she is already at the 3rd stage of the infection. This means that if you eat infected food, the fungus can take over your body at an accelerated rate. This final scene is kind of sad because this is where we see infected Granny trying to manipulate AJ and Apple Bloom by asking how they could betray their own grandmother. And while AJ seems to be handling it okay, this is really starting to tear up Apple Bloom. Twilight smartly tells them that she's going to handle this one, letting them go get some distance from the situation. Now, while Twilight is containing Granny, we see AJ is taking stock of the resources that they have on the farm, especially since so much of the orchard is infected, and honestly, it's probably safer to not consume any of the apples at all. Some good news is that the plum trees are unaffected by the fungus and also protect any crops like in close proximity. But even with that, the ponies are running short on food, only having about a week's worth of canned goods left. And just to put this into perspective, the average horse eats about 2% of his own body weight each day, which is roughly 15 to 25 pounds of food. So with 8 ponies on the farm plus Spike, they are going to have to find a new source of food ASAP. As we move over to the next scene, we see that Twilight is finally able to look into the bag that infected pony gave them a few days ago and learn what information she has inside. What we see is that the infected pony's name is Maisie, and she is a botanist, which just means that she is a scientist that specifically studies the biology of plants. And this also means that if they can stabilize her, she may be a great help in finding a cure here. We also learned that the first few entries about this fungus date back a few years, even though Mycota released her makeup only a couple of months ago, which may mean that Maisie is more involved in this situation than she's letting on. We also see that Maisie has highlighted a way to get rid of the pesky golden plant, which is to first isolate it and then burn it. And with this knowledge, the ponies went out to the orchard to see if this would actually work on the infected trees. Unfortunately, Twilight's magic isn't strong enough to create a spark, leaving them with one other option. They'll have to go to Cloudsdale, break into the weather factory, and make a thundercloud themselves. At first, I thought that this was kind of a convoluted idea, but then I remembered that these are horses. It's not like they have hands or anything to make fire with, so they're gonna have to take extreme measures. Now, seeing that they have no other real options, Rainbow grabs a cloud and places Pinky and Twilight inside. Then we see Pinky pull out something called luster dust, which is a cake decoration that turns the cake golden. Using this, we see that Twilight now looks like one of the infected ponies, which is smart because every Pegasus seems to be infected here. Eventually, Pinky puts the decorations on all of them, and they're able to make it to the factory with no issues. Once inside, they're easily able to make a thundercloud, but while doing that, we see a bunch of the Pegasus outside are gathered together. And one of them says that Rarity wants them to go to Ponyville, specifically the train station. And I'm sure most of you have probably figured this out already, but I think this shows us a lot of evidence that this fungus is definitely a hive mind. Seeing this, Rainbow pushes Pinky and Twilight back into the cloud and sends them floating away. But before she can follow, one of the infected ponies comes up and questions her. And while they're speaking, we can see that the cake decoration is starting to wear off, but luckily, Dash is able to talk herself out of the situation quickly and make it back to her friends. In the next chapter, we see that the ponies have made it back to the farm and started to isolate all the infected trees so that Dash can bring the thundercloud over and burn them. And with the help of Big Mac, they're also able to contain the fire, making sure not to burn the whole place down. Pinky and Apple Bloom are doing their part by making cupcakes out of the plums, which is actually really smart. They obviously need food, but also since the plums are antifungal, they'll keep any fungus from taking root inside the ponies. Now, to my surprise, they were able to save about 25% of the orchard, which is really good. I thought the whole farm was going to be a lost cause, if I'm being honest. In the final panels of this chapter, we get to see new stat sheets, and the Apple family are all in great health outside of Granny, of course. Pinky is still doing great as well, spending most of her time making more plum sugar. Dashie has been spending most of her time trying to keep the infected away from the farm, while Twilight has been studying the infected that they have in their care. One thing that scares me a bit about her is that her sanity is at about 70%, which is still high, but way lower than everyone else's. We see that Spike is even a little bit concerned for her, feeling like Twilight is pushing herself too hard. Next, we cut over to Fluttershy, and we learn that she is actually at stage 4 of the infection. I was really hoping that she wasn't going to be that far along, because now it's probably going to be a lot harder to save her. Maisie, on the other hand, is somewhere between stage 3 and 4, and is still in no condition to speak. Now, Granny is doing the worst, sitting at stage 4, but her body is not holding up well, which makes sense considering how old she is. Twilight's thinking that she'll probably move over to stage 5 soon, and when that happens, the fungus will leave her body and look for a new host, leaving nothing but a corpse behind. So I'm really hoping that they're able to save Granny Smith. The next chapter is interesting because it starts with Apple Bloom looking at the bag that Maisie gave to the group, but when they look at the tag inside, it said that it belonged to Micah Blossom. And this was actually Mykota's name before she changed it. And this makes the ponies very suspicious about Maisie, because she is connected to this outbreak in a much deeper way. But as I said earlier, she's still too far gone for them to actually get any answers out of her. And this fact is making Twilight spiral a little bit. She's getting more and more stressed about not being able to find any real answers or a cure. And while AJ is trying to reassure her, there are only 5 more days until Mykota meets Princess Celestia and Luna, so she's running out of time. In order to try to reduce some of her stress, AJ and Rainbow tell her to go back to her library and see if there's any information that she can use there, while Pinky and Big Mac are going to go to the bakery to try and grab some more supplies. The next chapter gives us access to Twilight's notes, and the first page is about Fluttershy. Basically, the note reveals that since Shy had been wearing the makeup the longest, she became addicted to it. This is the real reason that she broke out and went back to her cottage. She needed to get more of the makeup to put on herself in order to feed the fungus inside of her. And this information right here makes this fungus so much worse because it's kind of like smoking cigarettes. Once you start, it is hard to stop. The second page teaches us about the 2 kinds of infected. The first types are just the ponies that follow the main goal of the fungus, which is to get as many ponies to use the makeup as possible. The second type are called leaders, and these are the ones that are dangerous because they can direct other infected and also absorb their life force, like we saw Rarity do at the hospital. By doing this, the leaders can keep themselves from reaching stage 5 of the infection, which means that they can actually keep their body from breaking down. The next page talks about the real self, which is when infected ponies seem to come back to their senses for a short time. But as more time passes, those moments of clarity will be less and less often, as we see with Fluttershy. The next page goes over the ways that ponies can get infected, which involve like putting on the makeup, eating infected food, coming into contact with the plant directly, or just being in the same space as infected ponies for too long. And I think the final page here is the most important because it confirms that the fungus acts as a hive mind, just like we suspected. As of right now, Twilight believes that since Mykota is the first infected, that she is likely the one that has control over all the rest, or at least to some degree. And this is why it's such a big deal that they stop her before she can get to Luna and Celestia, because if she controls the princesses, she'll have a ton of power at her disposal. As we cut over to the next scene, we see Big Mac, Twilight, and Spike as they're making their way back into town, and I find it odd that there are no ponies around. Big Mac reveals that he saw a bunch of the infected heading to the train station a few nights back, meaning that they all may have gotten on that train and headed out of town, which, as Twilight points out, is what Rarity ordered them to do. And while Twilight is trying to figure out where the infected would have gone, she hears a voice pleading to be put out of their misery. When she looks down, we get this image of a pony that is clearly at stage 5 and is almost at the point where the fungus is ready to leave their body. But before Twilight can do anything about this situation, the infected pony's body gives out and they are turned into a golden puddle of goop. Later at night, after Twilight and her team had made it back to the farm, Twilight fell asleep and began to dream about her friends being together again and healthy. But before she can enjoy this moment too much, Rarity looks at her and says, "This isn't real, dear. Snap out of it." And then we see the ponies start to merge, becoming one big glob of golden fungus. And while Spike wasn't a part of the glob, the monster did manage to grab him. But before we can see his fate, Luna appears in the dream and places a shield up so that she and Twilight can speak. Now during this meeting, Twilight lets Luna know that they've been trying to reach them for weeks. And I'm happy to see that the princesses didn't just abandon them. They tried to send out letters to Twilight explaining the situation, specifically the fact that Mykota managed to infect the royal guards and use them to corner the sisters. The only reason they escaped is because they cast the Haven spell on themselves, which basically makes it to where nothing can harm them. Unfortunately, Mykota used her own magic to tamper with the spell, making the sisters lose their consciousness, meaning that their bodies are there, but their minds seem to be elsewhere. So while their bodies are still able to perform their duties, kind of like they're on autopilot, they can't seem to find their way back, meaning that they're kind of in a limbo right now. And unfortunately, with each day that passes, Mykota is gaining more and more power, and soon she may be strong enough to break the Haven spell. I find it interesting that hearing this, Twilight asks Luna if they ever plan to help any of their subjects, or just hide away. And I can't really blame her for feeling this way. It does sound like they never actually had a plan to protect Equestria. But Luna explains that they just wanted to make sure that Mykota couldn't infect them, and they didn't think that they would actually be locked out of their own bodies. But Luna does admit that she and Celestia have failed Ponyville in a way. And while Twilight is understanding, she also informs Luna that Makoto is coming back to the castle in 5 days, and this likely means that she is now strong enough to break the Haven spell. And you can tell that this is really making Luna panic. But before she can ask any more questions, the dream infected break through her shield and start devouring her. The final words that she gives to Twilight is that she needs to get back to Canterlot before Makoto does, so that they can actually help Celestia and Luna get their bodies back. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Were Luna and Celestia smart to use this Haven spell? Or do you think they should have just went and fought Makoto head on? On one hand, I understand that them not wanting to allow her to use their power, but on the other, they are some of the strongest ponies and they have a bunch of allies. I kind of feel like they could have held their own here. But let me know what you think down below. Now, after Luna was fully consumed, Twilight wakes up and she seems to have had an epiphany. And not wanting to waste any time, she hops out of bed and starts waking up the whole house. Once she gets all the ponies together, she explains her plan, which is basically to use the plum sugar to help infected ponies win their minds back. Twilight points out that when they use the sugar, for a brief moment, the infected ponies seem to go blank. During that window, if they can remind the ponies of who they actually are, it may allow them to take control of their minds again. And when Dashi asks Twilight to explain how reminding them who they are will help, Twilight gives a great answer. She says, "To be infected is to grow obsessed with becoming gold and perfect, to purge all your personal values and individuality, to endlessly chase a high that you know is ruining you." And I think this is such a great allegory for like addiction in general, especially when you think of drugs or gambling. But beauty can also fall under this umbrella as well, especially when you see people who get surgeries to try to look like more handsome or more beautiful and they end up actually butchering their face. People often chase these highs even though they know that they're ruining themselves in the end. After coming up with their plan, they make their way over to the barn and they decide that they're going to try this method on Maisie first. And while they don't know her that well, they do have all the information in her diary and in her notebooks. So they grab a mirror so that she can see herself, hit her with the plum sugar, and then start to read her diary entries. And slowly, Maisie actually starts to remember her life before she was infected, going back to a time where she was doing research on this fungus. We learn that her sister, who we can assume is Makoto, became infatuated with the golden rose and wanted to be shiny just like it. And thinking that it was harmless, Maisie told her sister to experiment with the plant since it seems to bind to ponies' coats really well, revealing that Maisie is the reason that Makoto started making this makeup in the first place. On a positive note, Twilight's plan works and Maisie comes back to herself and is in full control of her body, shedding tears of relief. In the next chapter, we see AJ celebrating the fact that they were able to save all their friends and family, but also highlighting that it isn't over yet. The team still has to go to Canterlot and help Luna and Celestia before Makoto gets there, or else Equestria will be plunged into eternal shine. After that, we cut to Maisie, and she confirms that she was the pony that discovered the fungus, but she didn't actually think that her sister would turn the fungus into a global business. She basically had to watch her sister slowly be taken over by the fungus, becoming more and more addicted each day. And wanting to help her, she started researching a way to get rid of the fungus, and also made her way to Canterlot to warn all the ponies about the coming danger. But at that point, she was already infected. Now she just wants to help the ponies reverse the damage that she helped cause. She's even willing to go to Canterlot with the ponies and confront her sister. The final panels of this chapter show us updated stat sheets for the former infected, and while Maisie isn't 100% yet, she is recovering well. Shy is also doing pretty good, but she has taken a lot of damage to her midsection and also may never be able to fly again. Granny is probably doing the worst out of the three, and that's likely due to her age. Her health is still far from 100%, and she can no longer use her back legs, and she can barely speak. But at least Big Mac was able to build her this custom wheelchair, and she is slowly recovering. The next scene starts with Apple Bloom in the Cutie Crusader clubhouse, and she is writing in her journal, wishing that she could find her friends in town. She even starts to reminisce about when she first saw Sweetie Belle wearing the makeup, and how she wished she would have been able to save her friend. And while I understand why she feels so bad about this, there's really no way that she could have saved her. While Apple Bloom is in her clubhouse, the other ponies are coming up with their plan to cure Makoto, and since they have her sister, it should be very possible. One of the biggest issues that they may run into is that the entire castle guard is likely infected, but Pinkie has been making plum sugar bubbles over the last week or so, and it looks like they are going to have more than enough to work with. After getting their plan of attack set, the ponies start to get geared up, but Twilight is stopped by Spike. It looks like the little dude wants to go to the castle with them, but Twilight refuses, telling him that he's just a baby dragon and this is a mission of life and death. And while I have to admit that he does look ready to fight, I think Twilight makes the right call by making him stay behind with Apple Bloom and Big Mac to guard the farm. The next chapter shows our ponies being at the train station, and they run into the issue of trying to figure out how to work the thing with no conductor. Luckily, AJ isn't daunted by the issue, and she gets to work trying to figure out how to get it to run. Now while that's happening, we see that Spike has snuck onto the train as well, wanting to prove that he can be useful. And I'm praying that he doesn't get himself bodied here. After a little trial and error, AJ and Rainbow are able to get the train moving, and the ponies are heading to their final battle. Over with Maisie and Twilight, we see that they have been researching an invisibility spell. Apparently, they can stay invisible for 30 minutes, which could definitely come in handy. The only downside here is that since this fungus is a hive mind, Makoto probably has some idea that the ponies are actually coming to her. She's likely listened in through Granny, Maisie, or Fluttershy. And based on how Maisie looks here, there may be something else that she isn't telling the group as well. Now while the group is making their way to Canterlot, Apple Bloom sees a TV announcement that is supposed to be from Luna and Celestia, but it is clear that these are not the real sisters. What it does tell us though is that Makoto is likely already at the castle, and the ponies are about to run into a whole lot of trouble. When we cut back over to Twilight and the team, we see that the drawbridge of the castle is already down, but then Pinkie points out that someone is heading their way. And just like they suspected, the guards are all infected with the fungus. And when they manage to get an overhead view of everything, they notice that a large amount of infected have all gathered here, not just Makoto and the Royal Guard. And it seems like Makoto's plan is to merge with all the ponies to make one godlike creature. A few moments later, we see that she comes out on this balcony to give a speech, and this is when the ponies come up with the plan to use their invisibility to get up to that room so that they can capture and cure her. And with that in place, Twilight works her magic and gives the team 30 minutes of invisibility. And initially, it seems to work great, as they are able to just walk past all the guards, and since it's so loud, they don't even have to worry about being loud. But once they get inside the castle, we see that the spores are floating around everywhere, and the particles are attaching to their coats, making them gleam golden. And it doesn't take long for the guards to notice and start going after them. Luckily, the girls are fast enough to lose them and make it up to a room where they can hide. Some get under the bed, some the closet, and even the chandelier. Also notice that at this point, the makeup is so thick in the air that it's saturating their face masks, meaning that even if they keep them on, they're still breathing in these spores. And I think this also solidifies that this is likely their final stand. The last thing we see before this chapter ends is AJ saying that her nose is tingling, which tells me that she's going to sneeze soon, likely giving up the team's position. The next chapter opens with Makoto coming into the room, and she is complaining about how her connection with the collective is weak today, which is interesting because you would think that it would be stronger with them all so close now. Funny enough, as soon as Makoto fully walks into the room, AJ has the urge to sneeze, but Twilight is able to get her hoof up in time to stop most of the sound. And while Makoto almost heard them, she's too concerned with telling the guards to find the intruders to care about the sound. Next, we see her go over to her counter and apply even more of the makeup, and this is the nail in the coffin for AJ. Try as she might, she's unable to stop the sneeze from coming, and Twilight isn't fast enough to get her hoof up this time. And Makoto is made very aware of their presence. But before she can do anything about the intruders, they all jump out and execute their plan to capture her. And for a moment, it looks like it may actually be working. Maisie seems to almost break through to her sister, but then Makoto comes roaring back, and she's mad as heck. Using her magic, she's not only able to break out of the bondages that they placed on her, but she's also able to wound AJ and shake off all the plum sugar that Pinkie has thrown her way. And once she has the upper hand, she calls her guards and she had them bring in a cage to contain all these ponies. And if that wasn't bad enough, she has become so powerful that she is able to negate the magic of the other unicorns. The reason being is because she has the power of dozens of unicorns within herself now, so she's just way more powerful than any of them. So at this point, the team basically has no choice but to get inside this cage and await whatever fate Makoto has for them. The one piece of good news right now is that AJ seems to be the only injured pony thus far. The bad news is that their one plan has completely failed. Something that may save them though is the fact that the guards are carrying their cage somewhere, and Twilight is hoping that they're getting moved to wherever Luna and Celestia are. But as Rainbow points out, that doesn't seem to be the case. Instead of going to the basement, the ponies are taken to this extravagant feast in the banquet hall. And Makoto tells them that this will be their final feast. And after she gets all the ponies tied up at the table, she brings in the fake Luna and Celestia. And while this pair isn't a real deal, the next pair definitely is, and that is Cadence and Shining Armor. I was really hoping that these two weren't going to get caught and like they were going to end up being a part of the rescue team later or something. Now, of course, when Twilight sees this, she doesn't take her brother being infected well, but they are both too far gone to even pay a little attention to her tears. Thankfully, Spike managed to sneak into the castle, proving that he can definitely come in handy here. And using his stealth skills, he's able to cut Pinky loose. And Makoto is so busy going over her master plan and telling the ponies that she is now strong enough to turn herself into a princess and be the sole ruler of Equestria that she doesn't even notice the little guy. Can we get a quick Spike is the GOAT? Because I think he's the MVP of this AU. Now, having her audience set, Makoto goes back to the balcony and begins giving her final speech. Below her are hundreds of infected chanting, "All hail Makoto," over and over again. And then she begins to absorb their essence into herself, using their strength to enhance her own body, becoming larger and stronger. And while I know that she is evil and considers herself to be a god now, I have to admit that she does look pretty dope here. Now, while she was distracted with her transformation, we see that Spike has managed to help get almost all the ponies free, but they fear that it may be too late to stop Makoto as she sets her sight on Luna and Celestia and their Haven spell. Surprisingly though, she has grown so large that she's having a hard time moving her body. The good news for her though is that her horn is the most important thing here. Right now, it contains the power of all the ponies that she's absorbed, and with that combined strength, she should be able to break the Haven spell with little difficulty. But before she can make her moves, the ponies burst into motion, pouring all their plum sugar directly on her face and then pleading with Micah, or whatever is left of her, saying that they know she's still in there and asking if she wants to see her sister again. And while Makoto is desperately resisting, Twilight strikes a nerve when she asks why she would turn her back on her sister. We then see Makoto scream out that Maisie is the one that turned her back on her. And then she asks her sister how much of the truth she twisted, confirming that Maisie didn't tell the ponies the entire truth. Eventually, Maisie stills herself and reveals the entire story, which is that it was her idea to make the fungus into a beauty product. And even though she knew that something was wrong with the plant, she liked seeing how much fame and money it made her sister and just wanted to see her continue to soar. However, she never expected the plant would cause this level of trouble, and that is when she started trying to actually find a cure. She couldn't stand seeing this parasite that was pretending to be her sister, and that's when she headed to Ponyville to try to find help. So she didn't truly abandon her sister, but rather she was trying to find a way to help her before it was too late. And now she has to live with the guilt of being a failed botanist and also being a bad big sister. Now, Makoto doesn't take this well though, saying that she isn't a failure, but a god. Although it does seem like Maisie was able to get through to her because the fungus seems to be weakening. And sensing that the end is near, Makoto tries to make it to Luna and Celestia and break the Haven spell, but her body is no longer able to hold out. With a burst of light, she explodes, scattering fungus all over the room and also breaking the Haven spell, bringing Celestia and Luna back to their bodies almost immediately. I find it funny right here that even though these two didn't really help out that much in this AU, Twilight and Pinky still give them the proper respect by bowing, even though they're like knee deep in filth. Seeing that Twilight was successful, Luna goes over and embraces her, showing how much she appreciates her hard work, while Celestia just looks confused at the absolute mess that surrounds her. The final chapter takes place 2 months later, and AJ is expressing her joy at things finally going back to normal after a full year. We learn that Makoto absorbed too many ponies and became unstable, which is why she exploded. It was simply too much energy for one body to be able to contain. Unfortunately though, the ponies that Makoto absorbed are mostly dead now, putting the death toll in the thousands, which I think is the most that we've seen in any AU that we've covered thus far. Celestia and Luna put out an order to ban the selling or the creation of the Golden Gleam, and also sent out exterminators to get rid of any of the fungus that they can find. I was also happy to learn that when the outbreak started getting really bad, a lot of the ponies just ran and hid, meaning that there are a lot of survivors in the grand scheme of things. It was also good to see that they were able to save both Princess Cadence and Shining Armor. In the final panel of this AU, we see AJ being called over to eat pie with her friends, making this one of the few AUs that not only has an ending, but has a happy ending. All in all, I was really impressed with this AU. I love the idea of the hive mind, but more like specifically, I like the fact that some of the infected ponies had different roles. The fact that Rarity was like a leader in this group and able to control some of the ponies in her own way, I thought was a cool little twist. I also love that this AU didn't just follow the formula of turning the ponies into mindless zombies, but rather it made them into like worker ants, and their whole goal was to simply increase the members of their colony. This one was definitely worth the read, and I'll be checking out to see if the creator has made any other AUs. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here, subscribe today to become a member of the Orseofkorse, and we will see you tomorrow with another video. Peace, peace.